Is there such a thing as a perfect rose? We all might disagree what are the most beautiful roses in our gardens, but I think we all will agree that the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Today in this video I'm going to talk about advantages and disadvantages of David Austin roses. So the first advantage is obvious. The beauty of David Austin roses cannot be beaten. And beware, I'm warning you, your heart might be stolen. These roses combine the charm, the beauty of old garden roses, which are not famous for their strong disease resistance or very strong growth habit or repeat blooming. They're once blooming, our old garden roses, although they're famous for having a very beautiful scent. But these roses, David Austin, during his hybridization efforts, combined those features of old roses, especially their beauty and charm, with modern traits which we now demand in our gardens. We want fairly good disease resistance, we want beautiful blooms, we want beautiful scent, and we want beautiful graceful habit. So when you look at the flowers of David Austin roses, you might right away fall in love, as what I did many years ago when I remember I spotted a rose in the magazine by David Austin, and I said to myself, oh gosh, what rose is that? And I started to do my research, and that's how I found the website of David Austin. Oh, I don't think it was a website. I found the link to a site where David Austin was selling his roses. So that's how I fell in love. And this is how you are going to fall in love if you will spot David Austin roses in somebody's gardens. So the biggest advantage of these roses are that they are very beautiful. And they are not only beautiful, they don't only have the beauty of flowers, they also have a very graceful habit. So even if these roses won't bloom, you will have a very graceful shrub or climber in your garden, a very graceful plant in your garden. David Austin roses create a very harmonious, leaf-filled bush, and that graceful habit continues through all the year. And the first disadvantage, which I would say is most noticeable in my garden, especially with this generous gardener rose, as you can see it right here. David Austin roses are not famous to hold their petals very long. So the big wind and petals fall down. Roses stay on the plant maybe the most for days. So these roses are not created to withstand 10 days in the vase and performs the same as the first day. They will never be the supermarket roses, which are sitting on that shelf for many days without any changes in color or shape. These roses have this fleeting beauty, which is here for several days, and then the petals start falling down. So let me find the rose. Look, this one is falling down. Look at this. These petals are quietly falling down, and they're forming a nice canopy of leaves on the ground. But there is a wonderful advantage again. Since the rose loses its flowers so quickly, at the same time rose is producing new buds so quickly. So one rose falls down, but there are 2 more buds, or 3 more buds, or 4 or 5 to create another bloom. So what I do, I just take the old blooms, redirect the energy of the rose to push new blooms, and we are delighted in a day or 2 with another flower. So this, particularly this climber, look how magnificent it is right now. And the performance of these flowers are going to go on for another maybe week and a half, and then it will slowly start to decline. It's not going to stop. We will have the same blooming habit, but a little bit less. So we will continue enjoying flowers for another maybe 3 weeks, and then this rose will come down for some time to produce another wave of blooms later in the season. So the beautiful advantage of David Austin roses is that they are very proliferous and they create blooms very willingly. We are moving to my adorable Lady of Shalott, the star of my garden. People keep asking how many rose bushes I have here. I have 2 and they're planted within 18 inches apart. So they're growing into each other, forming one big magnificent bush. Notice the graceful habit of this rose. We don't have a little shrub with a long stick and a rose on top. We have harmoniously formed shrub, and it persists like that through the year. Of course, Lady of Shalott is known to create very long octopus shoots, but that's a different story. That's just the nature of this bush. But if you look at this rose, you will see that there are several flowers which are already spent. And the reason is why they're spent so quickly. We had a rain which coincided with the first flush of blooms of Lady of Shalott, and these flowers, that's a small disadvantage of these type of roses, of David Austin roses. They're so beautiful, they're so charming, but they really can't stand up to the rain. They have this soft, charming beauty. And since rain coincided with the first flush of blooms, you see all these flowers are spent very quickly. So the disadvantage of David Austin roses, especially older varieties, is that they cannot really stand up to the rain. But mind you, just look how many buds Lady of Shalott is sending out. And I noticed that it happens with shrub roses of David Austin. The first wave comes in gentle, and then the second wave in several days is coming very powerful, and it's going to be the biggest blooms show of the season. So I'm expecting the second wave to come in a day or 2. Meanwhile, the roses which were damaged by the rain are ready to be trimmed. So that's what I'm going to do. I will just trim them out, and Lady of Shalott will redirect the energy again to these beautiful, wonderful buds. We moved to the front of my house, where I'm trying to collect beauty with functionality. I have 2 raised beds here. And here we have a row of Nepeta, which is always basking in the sun and performing these wonderful, beautiful flowers. And we have a lot of bees right now here, so this is somewhat of a cautious position here. But near my Nepeta, I have the rose with which I fell in love the first time I saw her blooms. It's Boscobel rose. It's not the newest introduction of David Austin roses, and I must say that some rosarians are complaining that especially all the introductions of David Austin are slow starters in the garden. It takes them 3 or 4 years to fully get established in our gardens. So in my example, in my garden, Boscobel is that rose. Just look at this growth. Right here, the bottom part of the rose is the older part. A rose created those stems last year, and you can see how weak and small they are. And all the flowers which that rose created on those stems fell down. So the rose was not able to support those beautiful big flowers. But this year, Boscobel rose sent these wonderful, strong stems, which are much higher. By the way, rabbits cannot get them now. They are able to stand to the wind, hold the flowers very well, and I'm expecting that next year my Boscobel rose will be fully mature in my garden and will perform even better. Good news for people who garden in colder zones. In zone 4, which is pretty cold for roses, is that David Austin roses, a lot of them are hardy to zone 4. And I live in zone 7, borderline 6-7, coastal Connecticut, in case you don't know. And these roses in my garden are just fine. But if you live in colder areas, please know that there are plenty of David Austin roses which can accommodate colder conditions. My Lady of Shalott, not Lady of Shalott, Generous Gardener is good to zone 4, and I don't do any protection on her whatsoever, and I didn't have any failing rose in my garden so far. So all the years I'm growing David Austin roses. Of course, I garden on a small lot. I don't have 2 acres of land to host 300 roses and compare their growth. But from whatever experience I have on my suburban lot with David Austin roses, I must say that they are very hardy, and they are ready to fight the elements and survive our winters. On another side, people who live in tropical areas in zone 12, 13, which is pretty hot, David Austin roses will refuse to bloom in those areas, and they're not going to perform well. So you can say that these charming beauties are not well suited for very hot climates. I'm covered with these wonderful blooms here. I have to deadhead this Boscobel rose. Wonderful. And the last biggest advantage of David Austin roses is, beware, I warned you. Once you have the first rose in your garden, you want to have them all. Your heart will be stolen, and you will become an ardent David Austin rose collector. I'm trying hard not to create my garden into just rose monoculture, because I know it's not good to have monoculture in the garden. That's an invitation for diseases and all sorts of problems. But I'm really fighting to control my desire to try a different David Austin rose and see how it will perform in my garden. So, what do you think? Is there such a thing as a perfect rose?